The last of the funeral casseroles sat untouched on the kitchen counter, their foil covers gleaming dimly in the weak November light. I stood by the living room window of the farmhouse my husband Oswin and I had built, my hands tracing the cold condensation on the glass. I was 78 years old, my body ached with a cold that had nothing to do with the Vermont weather, and my husband of 54 years was in the ground. All I wanted was to pull his favorite Afghan over my head and sleep for a year, but the silence in the house was sharp, brittle. My son, Jareth, and his wife, Kala, were not grieving. They were organizing. While I was still trying to scrub the smell of funeral lilies and damp earth from my memory, they were in the dining room. I heard the crisp shuff of papers. It was a sound of business, not a sound of mourning. "Mom," Jareth called out. His voice wasn't soft with shared sorrow, it was high-strung and impatient. He didn't come to me. He expected me to come to him, to the table where we'd signed decades of his report cards and birthday cards, the table where Oswin and I had paid the bills for this farm for half a century. I shuffled in, my house slippers catching on the worn Persian rug. "What is it, dear?" "I'm so very tired." Kala stood by his shoulder, her arms crossed, her expression like a locked door. She wore a black dress that looked more like it was for a cocktail party than a burial. Jareth didn't look up from the stack of documents in front of him. "This is the will," he said, his voice flat. "And the deed to the house. Dad left it to me. To us." The air rushed from my lungs. "What?" "No. Jareth, your father, and I, this is our home." "He would never." "He did," Kala interrupted, her voice a thin, sharp blade. "Oswin was worried you couldn't manage the upkeep. He knew you'd be better off in a managed community. He signed it over to Jareth 6 months ago, when he was still clear-headed." I stared at my son, searching his face for the little boy I'd raised, the one who used to cry when he stepped on a spider. "Jareth? You had him do this while he was sick?" "You let me think." I felt dizzy, the pattern of the rug swimming at my feet. "We're selling it, Mom," Jareth said, finally looking at me. His eyes were cold, like polished stones. "We have a buyer. A developer. They're closing in 2 weeks." 2 weeks? I gasped. My hand flew to my mouth. Sell this house. My roses, my kitchen. But where will I go? Jareth, this is everything I have. This is my life. I did what any mother would do. I reached for him, my hand trembling, trying to find his arm, his heart. "Please, son, don't do this. This is a mistake." Your father was confused. He recoiled as if my touch had burned him. "Don't," he shouted, and his hand flew up. It wasn't just a push. It was a slap. The crack of his palm against my cheek echoed in the silent, grieving house. It was so loud, so sharp, it stole my breath. I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my stinging face, the shock erasing the pain. Kala didn't even blink. She just watched, a tiny, satisfied smile playing on her lips. Jareth stood there, his chest heaving, his face twisted with a rage I had never, ever seen. "This isn't your home anymore," he spat, his voice shaking. "Get out!" He didn't sound like my son. He sounded like a stranger, a cruel, heartless stranger. The man I'd buried this morning would not have known the man standing in his dining room. I couldn't speak. The tears wouldn't come. I was frozen in a nightmare. Before I could find a word, Jareth moved. He grabbed the small suitcase I'd kept packed by the door for those final, frantic hospital visits with Oswin. It was a small, canvas bag with a broken wheel, holding 2 nightgowns and my heart medication. He wrenched the front door open, letting a brutal gust of icy wind tear through the hall, scattering sympathy cards across the floor. He hurled the bag onto the porch. It skidded across the wetboards and landed in a slushy puddle. "Go!" he screamed, his voice breaking. "Get out now!" He slammed the heavy oak door in my face, and I heard the unmistakable, final click of the deadbolt sliding into place. I stood there, stunned, the imprint of his fingers already rising on my cheek. The wind whipped my thin cardigan around me. I was on the porch of the home I had lived in since 1971, locked out by my only child, just hours after burying my husband. I had nowhere to go. My own son, he didn't just throw me out, he hit me. I was left on the porch with nothing but a suitcase and a stinging cheek. The shock was a physical thing, a block of ice in my chest that kept me from shaking. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the grain of the oak door, the door Oswin and I had stained ourselves one hot July. I could hear them inside. The sound of Calla's shrill laughter. She was laughing. I raised a trembling hand to knock, to beg, but I couldn't. What was the point? The deadbolt was a final answer. The slap had been the exclamation point. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an execution. The November air was not just cold, it was wet and mean. It bit at my face and soaked through my thin slippers. I looked down at my little bag, sitting in the puddle of melted snow. I picked it up, the handle cold and damp, and I started walking. Our driveway was nearly a quarter-mile long, a muddy, gravel track that cut through the bare apple orchard. Every step was a fresh betrayal. I thought of Jareth as a little boy, riding his tricycle down this very path, me running behind him, telling him not to go too fast. Now, he had pushed me out, and I was walking away, with no one to tell me to slow down. By the time I reached the main road, my feet were numb and my face was stiff. The sky was a deep, starless purple. I had no car. Jareth and Calla had taken our only working vehicle, an old Subaru, to handle the funeral arrangements, they'd said. Now I knew it was just one more thing they were stealing. The town of Hollow Creek was 2 miles away. I had no choice but to walk. I clutched my purse, feeling the small lump of my wallet. I was afraid to even look inside. It took me almost an hour. Each passing headlight lit me up, a 78-year-old woman in a funeral dress and house slippers, walking down the shoulder of a dark Vermont highway. I must have looked like a ghost. When the first streetlights of town appeared, I felt a wave of such profound shame that my knees buckled. I had to lean against the cold brick of the post office just to breathe. Where could I go? All my friends were my age, frail, living on fixed incomes. I couldn't be a burden. I couldn't bear the questions, the pity. I saw the light on at the Hollow Creek Diner. It was open 24 hours. The neon sign was missing its R, so it just said Dine. I pushed the door open, a little bell tinkling. The place was empty except for a woman wiping down the counter. It was Naoma, a woman I'd known since she was a teenager. She looked up, and her face went from tired to horrified. Maribel? My God, what happened to you? Your face. I hadn't realized how bad it was. I touched my cheek, and the pain, which had been hiding behind the shock, now screamed. I must have started crying then, because the next thing I knew, Naoma was steering me into a booth and wrapping my hands around a hot mug of coffee. They threw me out, I whispered. Jareth, he hit me. He and Calla, they threw me out. Naoma's face, usually so warm, hardened. She didn't ask 1,000 questions. She just nodded, her jaw tight. That witch, she muttered, meaning Calla. She knew. Everyone in town knew Calla. She'd been eyeing my farmhouse since the day she'd first laid eyes on it. Naoma went to the back and came out with a heavy coat and a $20 bill. The Hunter's Rest Motel is just 2 blocks down. You're going there. Don't you dare argue with me, Maribel. She pushed the money into my coat pocket. Get a room. Get warm. Tomorrow, we figure this out. I tried to refuse, but she wouldn't let me. I walked to the motel, checked in, and locked the door behind me. I collapsed on the musty bed, the shame burning hotter than the slap. I finally looked in my wallet. I had $114 and my heart pills. I was homeless. And then, as I stared at the water-stained ceiling, I remembered what Oswin had told me not to open. I'm safe for one night, but I'm homeless. My own son did this. But my late husband, Oswin, he gave me a warning, a key. What did he know? I didn't sleep. I just lay on top of the scratchy motel bedspread, my mind replaying the sound of the slap and the click of the deadbolt. My cheek throbbed with a dull, purple ache, but my heart ached with a pain that was infinitely worse. Oswin was gone. My son was a monster. My home was stolen. But as the sun started to cast a weak, gray light into the room, the fog of shock began to clear, replaced by something else. A cold, sharp memory. It was 3 weeks ago. Oswin was weak, his voice a dry rasp. Jareth and Calla were out running errands, which I now knew meant meeting with lawyers. Oswin had grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. Maribel, he whispered, if Jareth, if Calla, ever tries to push you. If they ever make you feel unwelcome in your own home. I'd tried to shush him, don't talk like that, my love. But he'd insisted. No, listen. The old workbench in the cellar. Under the loose floorboard. There's a tin box. He'd fumbled in his pajama pocket and pressed a tiny, cold key into my palm. Don't look unless you have to. Promise me. Promise me you won't look unless they force you. I had promised, thinking he was just delirious from the medication, paranoid. I'd slipped the key into the little zippered pocket of my wallet. I'd forgotten all about it. Until now. I fumbled for my purse, my heart hammering. I unzipped the pocket. There it was. A small, brass key for a padlock. A tin box. Under the workbench. What was in it? A different will? Cash? The problem was, it was inside the house. The house I was locked out of. A new kind of desperation flooded me. It wasn't just about shelter anymore. It was about the box. Oswin had known. He had seen this coming. He knew what his son and daughter-in-law were. He had left me, what? A weapon? An answer? I had to get it. I couldn't let them find it. I spent the day at the diner, drinking free coffee from Naoma, pretending to read a newspaper. I was watching my house. Or, at least, the road to it. I saw Jareth's car drive into town around noon. He went to the bank. Calla wasn't with him. She must have been at the house. My house. My stomach churned. I had to wait. Evening came. The sky turned dark again. I told Naoma I was going back to the motel, but I didn't. I walked the 2 miles back down the highway. I didn't go up the driveway. I cut through the woods, the way Jareth used to when he was a boy. I hid in the old, crumbling woodshed, my back against a pile of firewood. I was freezing, but my mind was on fire. I waited. Hours passed. Finally, around 9 p.m., I saw headlights. Jareth's car pulled up. He and Calla got in. They were dressed up. Going out. To celebrate. I waited until the red taillights vanished. Then I moved. I ran from the shed to the back of the house. I didn't try the doors. I knew Calla would have checked them all. But I knew something she didn't. The old cellar window, behind the big lilac bushes. The latch had been broken for 20 years. We'd always meant to fix it. I dug my fingers into the wooden frame and pulled. I'm breaking into my own home like a thief. Calla and Jareth are gone, but I don't know for how long. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get a grip on the window frame. I was 78 years old, my knees were screaming in protest, and I was breaking into my own cellar. I gave one desperate, grief-fueled yank, and the window screeched open. It was a tight fit. I had to push my bag through first, then awkwardly, painfully, swing my legs over the sill and tumble down onto a pile of old potato sacks. I landed hard, knocking the wind out of myself. For a full minute, I just lay there in the pitch black, breathing in the familiar, damp smell of earth and potatoes. I fumbled for the small flashlight on my keychain. The weak beam cut through the darkness. There was the furnace, the shelves of preserves I'd put up in August, and there, in the back corner, was Oswin's old workbench. My heart was pounding so loudly I was afraid it would echo up the stairs. I crept over, my slippers silent on the concrete floor. The bench was covered in his old tools, jars of screws, and cobwebs. I knelt, my joints crying out, and felt along the floorboards underneath. Just as he'd said, one of them was loose. I got my fingers under the edge and pried it up. And there it was. A small, tin recipe box. It was rusted shut and locked with a tiny brass padlock. My hands trembled as I dug the key out of my wallet. The key slid in. I turned it. The lock sprang open. But just as I was about to lift the lid, I heard it. A car door slamming outside. My blood turned to ice. They were back. They weren't supposed to be back. I heard the kitchen door open upstairs. I'm telling you, Jareth, I forgot my good purse, Calla's voice, sharp and annoyed. I can't go to the broker's dinner with my everyday bag. Footsteps clicked on the kitchen floor, directly above my head. I didn't breathe. I was trapped. I was in the cellar with a box full of secrets, and my new owners were home. Well, hurry up, Jareth snapped. He sounded miserable. I don't even want to go. It feels wrong. Calla let out an exasperated sigh. Wrong? What's wrong is living in this dump for 10 years, waiting for that old man to die. We finally have our lives back, Jareth. Don't you dare ruin this for me. That developer is giving us a fortune. Now stop moping. Her footsteps moved from the kitchen toward the living room. I knew this was my only chance. Calla was distracted. Jareth was spineless. I grabbed the tin box, didn't even look inside, and stuffed it into my canvas bag. I didn't put the floorboard back. I didn't have time. I scrambled back to the window, every movement an agony of suppressed noise. I heard Calla's footsteps coming back toward the kitchen. Jareth? Did you hear that? I thought I heard something in the cellar. My heart stopped. It's probably just a mouse, Calla. Or the house settling, Jareth's tired voice replied. Just get your purse so we can go. I didn't wait. I threw my bag out the window and pulled myself up. It was harder getting out than getting in. I scraped my arms on the concrete, my whole body screaming. I tumbled out into the lilac bushes just as I heard Jareth's heavy footsteps on the cellar stairs. Hello? Is someone down there? I didn't look back. I grabbed my bag and I ran. I ran through the dark orchard, my lungs on fire, my feet slipping in the mud. I didn't stop until I was half a mile down the road, hidden in a ditch. I made it back to the motel, my body covered in mud and scratches, looking like a woman who had just clawed her way out of her own grave. I locked the door, bolted the chain, and sat on the bed, my hands shaking. I pulled the tin box from my bag. I opened the rusty lid. Inside, there wasn't a will. There was no cash. It was just one thing, a small, worn, leather-bound diary. And the first page said, "My dearest Maribel, if you are reading this, I have failed you." A diary. Not a will, not money. A diary. What did Oswin mean, he failed me? What was in this book that he had to hide under the floor? I sat on that lumpy motel bed, the thin yellow light from the bedside lamp falling on the little book. My hands, stained with dirt and trembling, opened the cover. The first few pages were from 1971, right after we were married. It was Oswin's handwriting, the familiar, strong cursive I hadn't seen in years. But the first entry, the one dated just 3 weeks ago, was the one that mattered. My dearest Maribel, if you are reading this, I have failed you. And Jareth has failed you. I am a coward, and I am so sorry. My blood ran cold. I turned back to the beginning, to 1971. I started to read. And the story of my life, the one I thought I knew, unraveled. I thought Oswin and I had bought the farmhouse with his savings from his first job. That's what he told me. That's what he'd always told me. But the diary told a different truth. The farmhouse, the 200 acres of land, it wasn't bought with his money. It was bought with my inheritance. When my parents died in 1970, they left me $50,000. It was a fortune back then. Oswin, whose small logging business had just failed, convinced me to let him invest it for us. He bought this land, this farm. And he put it in his name. He told me it was safer for tax purposes, that it made better business sense. I was young, I was in love, and I trusted him. I never questioned it. I never asked to see the papers. The diary was his confession. He'd always meant to add my name to the deed. But he didn't. He used the property, my property, as collateral for business loans I never knew about. He built his entire life, our entire life, on my foundation and let me believe I was just his lucky partner. The will Jareth had, the one leaving the house to him, was legal only because the deed was in Oswin's name. My husband hadn't just allowed my son to betray me. He had set the stage for it, 50 years ago. I felt a new kind of grief, sharp and bitter, replacing the soft sorrow for my husband. It was the grief of being played for a fool. I turned the pages, my hands shaking with anger. And then, tucked into a leather flap in the back, I found the proof. It wasn't just a diary. It was an arsenal. Tucked inside were the original bank drafts from 1971. The wire transfer from the estate of Maribel's parents to the seller of the land. A faded promissory note, written and signed by Oswin, promising to repay me the $50,000 or sign over the deed, a note he never honored. The last diary entries were from the past 6 months, written in a shaky, weak hand. Calla is in his ear. She's poisoning him. She wants the land. She calls it her land already. And the final one, I'm too sick to fight them, Maribel. I'm a coward. I let Jareth believe it was all mine to give. I'm so sorry. This diary, these papers, they are the only proof you have that it was always yours. Forgive me. I closed the book. The tears that came now weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, unadulterated rage. My grief for Oswin turned to a cold, hard stone. My grief for Jareth turned to pity. And my hatred for Calla became a focused, burning beam of light. I was not a victim. I was not a guest. I was not homeless. I was the rightful and only owner of that farm. And they were squatters. Calla thought she was selling my house. She thought she'd won. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I picked up the motel phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 20 years. Mr. Abernathy? This is Maribel. Maribel. Carter. I need your help. My entire marriage was a lie. But my husband's confession is now my weapon. They didn't just kick me out. They kicked out the owner. Mr. Abernathy was 89 years old and had been practicing law in Hollow Creek since before I was born. He was the one who had handled my parents' will, and I remembered him as a sharp, no-nonsense man in a bow tie. I met him at the diner at 6 a.m. Naoma had it open just for us, and she stood guard at the door like a bouncer, a pot of fresh coffee in her hand. I hadn't slept. I'd showered, washed the mud from my hair, and put on the one clean blouse from my bag. I felt like a soldier preparing for battle. I sat across from him in the booth and pushed the diary and the bank drafts across the table. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just told him the truth. The slap. The deadbolt. The cellar. He listened, his ancient, bird-like eyes fixed on mine. He read the bank draft first, then the promissory note. He looked at the first page of the diary, then the last. He closed the book and placed his wrinkled hands on top of it. I told your father not to let Oswin handle that money, he said, his voice a dry rustle. I told him. But your father said you were in love. He sighed, then a fire lit in his eyes. This is a constructive trust, Maribel. That will Jareth is waving around? It's a piece of paper. Oswin held that property in trust for you from the moment your inheritance check cleared. He defrauded you. And this diary, he tapped the book, proves his intent. We have them. So, what do we do? I asked. Do we call the police? Do I show this to Jareth? Mr. Abernathy gave a small, grim smile. No. Not yet. We don't want to just get your house back. We want to make sure this never happens again. You said they have a developer? I nodded. Calla's handling it. They're closing in, oh, God, it's less than 2 weeks now. He pulled a flip phone from his pocket, a phone that was probably an antique, and made a call. Get me a title search on the Carter farm. And get me everything you can on a Calla Devereaux. Yes, I'll hold. He listened, sipping his coffee. MHM. I thought so. He hung up and looked at me. The developer they're selling to is a shell corporation. CD Enterprises. Calla Devereaux. She's not just selling your house, my dear. She's committing fraud against her own husband. My mind reeled. What do you mean? She's buying the 200-acre property from Jareth for $150,000, a fraction of its worth, using his signature on the will. Then, she has a second sale, a real one, lined up with an actual developer from New York for $3 million. She's planning to take the money, divorce Jareth, and leave him with nothing but the taxes on the $150,000. She's not just greedy. She's brilliant. And evil. I felt sick. She was going to destroy my son, the son she had already turned into a monster. How do we stop her? I whispered. They think you're a frail old woman, Maribel, he said, his voice hardening. That's our weapon. They're having the real developer, the New York group, walk the property this Friday. Calla will be there, pretending she's the sole owner. Jareth will probably be told to stay in town. He leaned in. We're going to go. Go? We're going to go to the open house. And we're going to introduce ourselves. I looked down at my hands, still bruised from the cellar window. I wasn't scared anymore. I was cold. Don't just go, Mr. Abernathy, I said, my voice lower than I'd ever heard it. We're going to make an offer they can't refuse. Calla isn't just stealing my house, she's planning to destroy my son and run off with millions. But she doesn't know I have the diary. She doesn't know I'm coming. Friday is the day. Friday arrived with a bright, brutal cold. The sky was a sharp, cloudless blue, and the snow on the ground crunched under my feet. Mr. Abernathy picked me up from the motel in his ancient, immaculate Lincoln. I was wearing my funeral dress, the only decent thing I had, but I'd washed it in the motel sink. Naoma had loaned me a heavy wool coat and a pair of sturdy boots. I held my canvas bag on my lap. Inside it was the tin box. As we turned up the long driveway, my driveway, I saw it. Calla had already put up a sale pending sign. My stomach twisted with rage. A black, expensive-looking SUV was parked by the barn. Calla was on the porch, wearing a new, cream-colored cashmere coat, her hair perfect. She was laughing, pointing out the boundaries of the property to two men in suits. My son, Jareth, was nowhere to be seen. Just as Mr. Abernathy predicted. "That's them," Mr. Abernathy said. "The New York buyers." He parked the Lincoln right behind their SUV, blocking them in. Calla's head snapped toward us. Her smile vanished. Her face, when she saw me climbing out of the car, was a mask of pure, unfiltered fury. "What are you doing here?" she shrieked, marching down the porch steps. "I told you to get out. I told you. This is private property. I'm calling the police." The two men in suits looked on, confused. "Ma'am, who is this?" one of them asked Calla. "It's nobody," Calla spat, her eyes locked on me. "Just the senile old woman who used to live here." I walked right up to her, close enough to see the panic in her eyes. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke calmly, my voice carrying on the cold air. "You can't call the police on the owner of the house, Calla." She laughed, a high-pitched, ugly sound. "Owner? You're not the owner. I have the will. Jareth has the will. This house is ours." "Gentlemen," Mr. Abernathy said, stepping forward and handing a business card to each of the men. "My name is Silas Abernathy. I am the attorney for Mrs. Maribel Carter, the sole legal owner of this property." Calla's face went white. "He's lying. She's senile. She has nothing." "I have this," I said. I opened my bag and took out the tin box. I opened it and held up the faded bank draft from 1971. "I have the proof that this farm was purchased with my inheritance. My husband, Oswin, held this property in a constructive trust for me." The men in suits looked at the paper, then at Calla. Their expressions hardened. "What is this?" one asked her. "And I have this," I said, holding up the leather diary. "My husband's confession. He was many things, but in the end, he was honest. He knew you were poisoning my son. He knew you wanted to steal my home." Calla stumbled back, her eyes wide with terror. "It's a lie. It's all lies. Forgery." "The will you hold may be real," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice cutting through the air like a razor. "But the sale you just filed with the county clerk is not. Gentlemen, Mrs. Carter Devereaux here," he motioned to Calla, "is selling this $3 million property to a shell company named CD Enterprises for $150,000. She's committing wire fraud, mail fraud, and spousal fraud against her husband, Jareth Carter. She was planning on taking your money and disappearing." The two developers looked at Calla with pure disgust. "Is this true?" one demanded. Calla was trapped. Her face contorted into a mask of pure hatred. "You old witch. You ruined everything." I've exposed Calla in front of her buyers. Her whole multi-million-dollar scam is falling apart. But Calla is a cornered animal, and I'm standing right in front of her. The silence that followed Mr. Abernathy's words was heavy and cold. The two developers looked from the papers in my hand to Calla, who was breathing hard, her face white with rage. One of them pulled out his phone. "We're done here, ma'am. We'll be speaking to the district attorney about this. You've wasted our time." "No!" Calla screamed. "You can't. This was my deal. Mine." She lunged, not at me, but at the man with the phone, trying to grab it. He shoved her back easily. "Don't touch me. We're leaving." They got in their SUV, and in their hurry to get away, they reversed off the driveway, tearing up the lawn I had spent years tending. They sped off down the road. Calla was left standing there, her $1 million deal gone. Her new cashmere coat was spattered with mud. And then she turned to me. Her eyes were no longer human. They were pure, animalistic rage. You, she whispered. You. I had it all. It was perfect. I was going to be free of this hick town, and your pathetic, weakling son. And you couldn't just die. This was never your house to sell, Calla, I said, my voice shaking, but firm. It was always mine. It was mine, she shrieked, and she flew at me. She was fast. She grabbed the tin box from my hands and threw it into the snow. She raised her hand, her nails bared like claws, and aimed for my face. But before she could touch me, a new voice roared. Calla! No! Jareth. He must have been in the barn. He must have heard everything. He ran between us, grabbing Calla's wrist in midair. Jareth! Let go of me! Calla screamed, struggling. She ruined it. She ruined everything for us. For us? Jareth's voice was a broken whisper. You were selling it? For $150,000? To yourself? He had heard. He'd heard it all. You were leaving me? You made me hit my mother, for this? The full, horrifying weight of his actions crashed down on him. He wasn't just a man who had been manipulated. He was a fool. An accomplice. Calla saw she'd lost him. She dropped the act. So what? She spat, yanking her arm free. Yes. I was leaving you. Do you have any idea what it's like being married to you? A weak, pathetic mama's boy, crying about his dead dad. I was doing us a favor. I was giving you half. You're a liar. Jareth screamed. He raised his hand. That same hand. The one that had struck my face. He raised it, his whole body trembling with rage, and aimed for Calla. I saw the motion, a perfect, horrifying repeat of what he had done to me. Jareth! I shouted. He froze. His hand was inches from her face. He looked at his own hand, at Calla's terrified, hateful expression, and then, he looked at me. The rage collapsed, replaced by a wave of self-loathing so profound it buckled his knees. He staggered back, staring at his own hand as if it were a snake. Oh God, he whispered. Mom, oh God, what am I? What did I do? What did I do? He collapsed on the porch steps, the same steps he'd thrown me from, and buried his face in his hands, sobbing. I didn't go to him. I couldn't. I walked past him. I walked right up to Calla, who was breathing hard, her eyes still full of hate for me. I picked up the diary and the papers from the snow. I looked her dead in the eye. Calla is exposed. Jareth is broken. But it's not over. My son is in ruins, and the woman who caused it all is still standing on my property. Calla stared at me, her chest heaving. The fight was gone, replaced by a cold, reptilian calculation. She was already planning her next move, her escape. You can't prove anything, she hissed, pulling her muddy coat tighter around herself. It's my word against a dead man's diary. Now get off this property before I call the sheriff. I believe the sheriff is already on his way, Mr. Abernathy said, stepping forward. He held his small flip phone in his hand. I called him from the car. I explained the situation. The wire fraud, the attempted sale of a property you don't own. I believe he'll be very interested in hearing your side of the story. As if on cue, the red and blue lights of a police cruiser appeared at the end of the driveway. Calla's face, which had been pale, went a sickly, greenish-white. She took a step back, then another. She looked at her car, then at the police car blocking the drive. She was trapped. She lunged for the barn. Calla, no! Jareth screamed, looking up. But she was already gone, disappearing into the darkness of the hayloft. The police officers got out of their car, and Mr. Abernathy went to meet them, handing them a file he had prepared. While they talked, I finally looked at my son. Jareth was a broken man, sitting on the steps, his body shaking with sobs. I sat down next to him. Not close, but on the same step. We sat in silence, listening to the officers calling for Calla to come out of the barn. She told me you were going to sell it and give the money to the church, he mumbled into his hands. She said you hated me for not being a better son. She said Dad told her. I believed her. I wanted to believe her because I wanted the money. I hated my job. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I looked at the barn, then at the man who was my son. I know what she told you, Jareth. And you still did it. You still raised your hand to me. That's not Calla's fault. That was your choice. That was you. He flinched, as if I had slapped him. I forgive you, I said, and the words felt heavy and real. Because you are my son. But I will never, ever forget what you did. You are not welcome in this house. He nodded, fresh tears streaming down his face. I know. I have to go. He stood up, a man with no wife, no inheritance, and no home. He stumbled to his car, her car, I realized, and drove away, not even looking back as the police led Calla, covered in hay and handcuffs, out of the barn. I was alone. Mr. Abernathy put a hand on my shoulder. It's done, Maribel. The title will be restored to you, and you alone. The house is yours. I stood on the porch and looked at my home. I walked inside. Calla's new, expensive furniture was everywhere. The walls were painted a cold, sterile gray she called modern. It smelled like her perfume. It felt tainted. It was not my home anymore. Not because Jareth said so, but because I no longer wanted it. I had built this house. I had fought for this house. And now, I was going to do the one thing they never expected. I was going to wipe it all away. The house is mine. Calla is in jail. Jareth is gone. But the house is tainted with their betrayal. The house was a monument to a life that was over. It was a monument to Oswin's secret and Jareth's betrayal. I couldn't sleep in the bed my husband had lied in. I couldn't cook in the kitchen where my son had raised his hand to me. The farmhouse was a beautiful prison of memories, and I was finally free. I stayed at the Motel 1 last night, and in the morning, I called Mr. Abernathy with a clear mind. Sell it, I said. Maribel? He asked, surprised. Sell all of it, I repeated. The house, the 200 acres, the barn. Sell it to those New York developers. They know what it's worth. Get me the full price. Mr. Abernathy, God bless him, didn't argue. He must have heard the finality in my voice. He made the call. The developers, now knowing they were dealing with the legitimate owner, were thrilled. The sale went through for $3.2 million. The day the papers were signed, I stood in the empty house one last time. All of Calla's furniture was gone, sold at auction to help pay her legal fees. All of my old furniture was in storage. It was just a cold, empty box. I closed the door, and this time, I was the one who locked it. I didn't look back. I was 78 years old and a multimillionaire. But the money wasn't the victory. The victory was the choice. I sat down with Mr. Abernathy and wrote out checks. I gave Naoma $100,000 to buy her diner outright and renovate the kitchen. She cried and tried to refuse, but I just told her to keep the coffee hot. I set up a fund at Mr. Abernathy's firm, a second chance fund to provide free legal aid for other seniors in my town facing eviction or elder abuse. Then, I put $1 million into a trust for Jareth's children, my grandchildren. They couldn't access it until they were 30, and only if Jareth was not their legal guardian. He would not, and could not, touch a penny of it. And what about me? I bought a plane ticket. I flew south, away from the Vermont cold, away from the mud and the snow and the memories. I bought a small, beautiful cottage in a little coastal town in South Carolina. It's not a mansion. It's a simple, blue house with a wide, screened-in porch and a garden full of flowers I don't recognize yet. From my porch, I can smell the salt in the air and hear the ocean, just 2 blocks away. I hear Jareth is working. A manual labor job. He's divorced. Kala took a plea deal and will be in prison for 3 years. Jareth sends me letters, full of apologies and self-pity. I read them. But I don't reply. Not yet. Maybe someday. This morning, I woke up to the sun, not an alarm. I made coffee and sat on my new porch, a light blanket over my knees. I am 79. I am not a victim. I am not just a survivor. I am the woman who built a life, lost it, and had the strength to build another one, all on her own terms. They thought they were throwing me out. They didn't realize they were just setting me free. My story started with a slap, but it ends with peace. If you or someone you know has ever been made to feel small, invisible, or powerless, let this be your sign that it is never too late to reclaim your life. Thank you for watching my story. Please like and subscribe for more stories of strength and survival.